The great kings need to be warriors, warriors in a specific way, that they resist evil, they bear their cross, and shoulder their responsibilities. Hello and welcome to HD Philosophy, the channel where we take some time with the classics to awaken the hidden dragon within all of you. And this is episode 7 of the Gospel Meditations, where I outline and discuss the insights from my family breakfast as we meditate on this week's gospel message. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ranked match as we meditate on Colossians 1:12 through 20.
Let's go!
Giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of his love, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. For it pleased the Father that in him all fullness should dwell, and by him to reconcile all things to himself by him, whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross. So this week's gospel meditation is actually from Bishop Barron, and we started discussing what the implications were when he stated, look, Christ is king, but when we are baptized, we are actually conformed to Christ, who is priest, prophet, and king. So we are commanded to play a kingly role. We are tasked to order things like a king towards the aim of God's kingdom. Now, I know the word king has negative connotations nowadays, especially to an American ear, given that it is said that the American Christian would rather die on his feet than live on his knees. But consider what kind of king is being described here. When I talk to my students, I have to go over Plato's Republic. And in Plato's Republic, he talks about how the state mirrors the internal harmony of the soul. And he talks about a just king and what a just king would do. And a just king orders all the other sections to work towards the aim that they are best suited. So it is the philosopher king in this instance that is ruled by reason and keeps everything in harmony, much like your soul is in harmony when reason is in charge. This is what he meant in the Phaedrus, where he likened the harmony of the soul to a charioteer and two horses being pulled. You are only free when you are ruled by reason, when the charioteer is in charge and keeps the spirit and appetitive horses in check and aims them towards what is best suited. For Aristotle, he takes more of a friendly role when he discusses the just state. The just state is ruled by just laws. And what are just laws? Just laws are the laws that allow you to be the best individual you can be. Much like a best friend who wants the best for you will ensure that you are well-oriented, but also make sure that people who would want the worst for you are taken out of your life. So they act as a shield to the things that would disharmonize you. This is actually where we get the concept of paternalism. I just had this discussion with my students this week where we examined how my medical students can supersede the patient's autonomy when they're not acting rationally, but they're not allowed to do whatever they want. There's a reason we call this paternalism, when we supersede the autonomy of the individual, because there is this inherent, what would a parent want for their child? What would an individual who loves that other individual want for them? This concept is so prominent in medical ethics that a famous bioethicist by the name of Edward Pellegrino would state that even being ill is a state of wounded humanity. So we could see healthcare as bringing a person back into autonomy. But the physician, the nurse, the doctor, they have to make decisions that bring this patient back into a state of autonomy. So they're acting like a just king. They are healing, but they're also acting towards a specific aim where things that would move against them are actually expelled. They almost act like, again, a shield to these patients. Now, think about how we are all called to be kings, because through Christ, all of us are kind of commanded to orient ourselves towards the Lord, men and women. So, how do we play a king in our lives? How do we play this kingly role in our lives? Well, I think about my responsibility to my children. As a father, it is my job to make sure the things that would enter into their lives, that would destroy them, that would make their lives worse, that would subjugate them, those things are expelled. I act as a deterrent to those things. The instinct here, though, is that I want what is best for my kids. So there is that intentional aim right there. But more specifically, the Bible gives us some examples of what are good kings. And this is why Bishop Robert Barron started talking about the kings in the Bible and what they really have in common. We're talking about the great kingly figures like Abraham, David, Moses, and Joshua. What he stated was they all listened to a higher voice. They listen to something beyond themselves. And I find this fascinating because even in Plato's Euthyphro, there was this idea that what is moral? What is pious? It can't just be what I'm doing right here. It has to be something beyond my actions here on earth, because my actions here on earth can only be examples of the good. They can't be representations of the good. So already I'm moving out of my own ego into something higher, something beyond me, something that has more power and authority than just my own whims at the time. So the great kingly figures, they all listen to a higher voice. And what's so fascinating is that Bishop Robert Barron gives an example of when David becomes a bad king. David becomes a bad king when he stops listening to God and he starts acting like God himself. This is the example he gave when he referenced Bathsheba. Now, that's just one of the aspects that makes them a great king. The other one is they are warriors. They resist the evil that must be resisted. I think about Jonah and the whale. With Jonah, Jonah was called upon to lift up and shoulder a responsibility. Go over to that town. They are evil. You need to evangelize. You need to fix the evil in the world. And then he runs away from this responsibility, and then his entire life becomes disharmonized because of it, even being tossed into the ocean where he's swallowed by a whale until he shoulders his responsibility and says, okay, I'll do it. And then, of course, he's spit up on land, and then he goes and he does it. The great kings need to be warriors in a specific way, that they resist evil, they bear their cross, and shoulder their responsibilities. So then, how do we fail to be good kings in our life? Well, first of all, we may not order things to the righteous ends. I remember this time where we were hiring a teacher. This is back when I was in K through 12. And there weren't many good candidates, but there was a candidate that surprised us all. Very experienced, had a nuanced way of approaching biology. But what I found fascinating is that my fellow coworker didn't want to hire them. Not because they weren't qualified, but rather they were worried the new person would make them look bad. You see, isn't that fascinating? That is not ordering the school towards a good end. You would rather hire somebody who won't be as impactful because of your fear, your inferiority. So in this instance, he wasn't ordering the school towards a proper end. Think about this when you get resentful of someone else. What really impacted me this year is when I realized why we need to hate the sin and not the sinner. Because if I hate the sinner, when something good happens, I actually hate the good. I can imagine a scenario where you have coworker A and coworker B. Coworker A hates coworker B. She believes that she receives undeserved accolades. She becomes very resentful of coworker B. And then on top of that, coworker A cannot have children, and coworker B is now blessed with a child. She is now pregnant. You can imagine coworker A having so much hate and so much resentment for coworker B that she actually hates this blessing. That's the danger right there. The hate for the sinner has become so strong that we actually hate the good, the God in their lives. So again, this is not orienting ourselves to a good end right here. Additionally, as a father, I can't help but give this example. We have to say no. We can't say yes all the time. If we say yes all the time, well, then the child doesn't understand the boundaries in their lives. I'm sure all of us have this experience in our lives, whether at a family dinner or out at a restaurant, where we see a child who clearly has never been told no. What are they like? They're a spoiled brat. They move wherever their whims take them. They have no grounding. They have no self-control. Well, that's because the kings in their lives, their mother and their father, didn't say no, didn't orient them correctly. Which leads to the second on how to fail to be a good king. We don't guard ourselves against the evils of the world. We succumb to petty temptations. We allow greed, pride, or the pursuit of fame that often happens with me. We allow that to enter into our heart, and it leads to disorder. I think about The Lion King and how Mufasa had this great kingdom, but he didn't guard the kingdom against the evil that was in his own household. And what happened? The entire kingdom was destroyed. I can just see that picture when Simba comes back and Pride Rock is just desolate, you know? This is what happens when we allow evil to come into our kingdom, where we don't guard ourselves, or we succumb to the temptations that subjugate our will. Copious amount of junk food, for example, drugs, sex, these things that provide temporary pleasure, but then when they leave their mark, they want more and more of me. This is how we fail to be warriors. And you know, Christianity often gets this bad reputation of putting all the blame of original sin on Eve. But what people fail to realize is that if you read Genesis from the beginning, Adam has a specific responsibility to guard Eden. And so when Eve comes along and Eve is tempted by the serpent, Adam is right there. And then he blames God for making Eve. He stood by and allowed evil to enter his kingdom. And then he allowed evil to corrupt the person that was closest to him. This is why I love the image of Jesus as a shepherd, because a shepherd has to guard the sheep from the wolves. He can't be tolerant of everything. This is a mistake all of my students make on the first week of their ethics course. They all come in with this idea that tolerance is an intrinsic good. It's not intrinsic, it's instrumental. It can be used in good ways and it can be used in bad ways. We are not called to tolerate everything. If you look at Jesus as the shepherd, he can't tolerate everything, because tolerance for the wolves is death to the sheep.
These are some fighters who know their stuff! I won't lose to anyone!
Thank you for watching HD Philosophy. Like, share, and subscribe.